Hey everybody, I'm your host, East Coast Pete. This is a special request. Today we're going to have a look at the Doors. Now, I did a show on John Densmore for my For Drummers Only. Today I want to look a little more into the Doors, their myth, their history, some of the things that befell them. The Doors are an American rock band formed in Los Angeles in 1965. Vocalist Jim Morrison, keyboardist Ray Manzarek, guitarist Robbie Krieger, and drummer John Densmore, perhaps the most controversial band in rock, the top 10 at least. This was due to Morrison, both with his lyrics and his stage persona. Now this is pure counterculture. The Doors are the Rolling Stones of America in the late 60s. The Doors' name was taken from Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception novel, itself a quote from William Blake from the early 1800s. Not for nothing, William Blake, a poet, is considered the greatest artist Britain has ever produced. As a comparison, Jim Morrison, a poet, is considered a troubled, drug-addled genius who never wanted to be a rock star. The Doors released 8 albums in 5 years, some of which are very high on the list of the greatest rock albums of all time. And then Morris died in 1971 at the age of 27 in Paris, France. The Doors continued until 1973. And then, in 2002, Manzarek, Krieger, and vocalist Ian Astbury of The Cult performed as the Doors of the 21st century. John Densmore and the Morrison estate successfully sued them over the use of the Doors name. They changed to Riders on the Storm, and then to Manzarek Krieger, and they played Doors music until 2013 when Manzarek died. 1993 saw the Doors inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. By now, the history of the beginning of the Doors is well known, either from the Roger Stone Val Kilmer movie or from one of the many bios out there, such as No One Gets Out of Here Alive by Jerry Hopkins. Primarily, Ray Manzarek met Jim Morrison at the UCLA School of Theater, where they both attended as future filmmakers. This is on Venice Beach near Santa Monica, California. Morrison had written poetry for several years. When he showed Ray the lines of Moonlight Drive, they decided to form a band. Their timing was impeccable. The Beatles had declared flower power a revolution. The San Francisco Summer of Love was still 2 summers away, and the LA rock scene was flourishing along Sunset Boulevard, with quite a few clubs where bands played, most notably the Whiskey A Go-Go. Densmore knew Manzarek from meditation classes. Robbie Krieger was the last to join. Krieger was into flamenco guitar. The Doors played often at the London Fog, a dive bar. Jim was racked with stage fright, could not sing to the audience, but stood facing the band spouting his poetic lyrics. The first songs were The End, Light My Fire, and When the Music's Over. Backdoor Man was a cover of a Willie Dixon blues number. At the Whiskey, the Doors opened for Van Morrison's Them. Elektra signed the Doors, but not before they were fired from the Whiskey for performing The End in all of its, wait for it, father-killing, motherfucking Oedipal grandeur. The first album had a toned-down version of The End without the explicit profanity. The debut album was critically acclaimed as a pivotal moment in psychedelic rock. It was eventually ranked number 42 on the Rolling Stone magazine's 500 greatest albums of all time. It had sold 20 million copies. Krieger had only been playing electric guitar for 6 months at the time of the recording. Densmore was a jazz drummer. Manzarek played a Fender Rhodes keyboard and provided the structure for the songs. Jim riffed vocals as he saw fit, and it all worked. Break On Through to the Other Side was the first single. The End was prominently on the soundtrack of Francis Ford Coppola's 1979 war film Apocalypse Now. In 1979, Jim had been gone for 6 years already. He was infamous in life and in death. Break On Through went only to number 104 in Cashbox and 126 on Billboard. The music was not evil, but it was darker than anything else at the time. Any drug references were edited out. This was not black metal. It was blues rock and pop music. Teeny boppers were record buyers. The breakout hit was Light My Fire, composed by Krieger. The 7-minute song was edited down to under 3 minutes for radio play. Manzarek played the bass line on his Rhodes with his left hand, and he played the well-known organ intro with his right hand on a Vox Continental keyboard. Light My Fire pushed the album to number 2, right behind Sgt. Pepper. Other songs that have since become favorites are The Crystal Ship, 20th Century Fox, Soul Kitchen, and Alabama Song, aka The Whiskey Bar. I have always loved The End, with Robbie Krieger's exotic tuning. Ed Sullivan was not an enthusiastic Doors supporter. His really big shoe that Doors played just once, and Ed said once was too much. In the 60s, the press was severely anti-drug, which translates to anti-counterculture. Sure, I'm anti-drug, but I'm also anti-censorship. There were several songs on the Billboard charts that had pro-drug references, allegedly. 3 of these were Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, 8 Miles High by the Byrds, and Light My Fire by the Doors. Purple Haze was not censored since the media didn't know what Purple Haze was. 8 Miles High was banned from radio play, as we've seen. Doing that only makes for more infamy and increased interest. Light My Fire was not about drugs at all and had plenty of radio play. Ed Sullivan politely requested that the Doors change the line, "Girl, we couldn't get much higher," to "Girl, we couldn't get much better." For the performance, the Doors agreed to do this, but live, Jim either forgot or he intended to defy the request. The Doors were banned from Ed Sullivan's show, but Jim expressed ambivalence. It was seen as a defining moment in rebelling against the man. The Doors' fame grew geometrically as the media went berserk. It was all very entertaining, but only one thing was proved. Cover-ups and censorship do not work as intended. Strange Days was the Doors' second album. A Moog synthesizer was used minimally. The album went to number 3 but stayed on the charts for only a short time and was considered a letdown. Manzarek's bass keyboards worked well live, but not in the studio. Session basses were used on the album and on all the subsequent albums. The charting singles were Love Me 2 Times, A Punchy Blues, and People Are Strange. New techniques in the studio were prompted by the Doors' reaction to Sgt. Pepper. The result was that Strange Days lacks spontaneity. Even so, it was a commercial success. My Eyes Have Seen You and Moonlight Drive were from the live set. The People Are Strange single was a result of a hike into Laurel Canyon by Morrison and Densmore. Jim was deeply depressed, but after the hike, he was euphoric. He wrote down his feelings, and these became lyrics to People Are Strange. What was Jim depressed about? 2 points I'll make about that. Jim may have been feeling inadequate to the pressures of fame, since his goal had always been to just publish his poetry. 2, depression doesn't have to be caused by events. It's a neurological condition, a temporary disorder in the brain due to an erratic influx of neosynephrine. This is genetic, but can be affected by drug and alcohol abuse. Poets are depressed. It's why they're poets. Jim's father was a Navy officer, a career commander, and Jim was not his favorite subject as his fame grew. Love Me 2 Times, written by Krieger about a soldier shipping out, and was accompanied by a harpsichord by Manzarek, not typically a blues instrument. Sgt. Pepper influence, maybe? An 11-minute opus appeared at the end of Strange Days titled When the Music's Over. Turn Out the Lights. Manzarek was influenced by Herbie Hancock's Watermelon Man for this melody. Turn Out the Lights has multiple themes: environmental, ecological, anti-society, rebellion. We want the world and we want it now. Youth culture and even a Mideastern flavor. It was the 60s. The country Israel had been in the news, the 8-day war with Egypt. Morrison was aware that the Middle East was a powder keg. It could spark strange days as in war, even a third world war. The media was still buzzing about higher in Light My Fire. Jim was amazed that they ignored When the Music's Over to focus on such silly and trivial topics. When there was so much else happening, Jim said if kids wanted to get high, it was because the world was unstable and scary. December 1967, New Haven, Connecticut. Morrison was arrested by local police while performing. The officer happened upon Jim, who was kissing a girl fan in a shower stall, and the officer didn't recognize him. I'm pretty sure that the girl recognized him just fine. The policeman told the couple to leave, and Jim told him, "Eat it." The policeman maced him and warned Jim, "Last chance," to which Jim replied, "Last chance to eat it." Jim did not go on stage for another hour while he recovered from the mace. Halfway through the first set, Jim related to the crowd about his experience with the little men in blue. The police arrested him for inciting a riot, which hadn't happened. The charges were dropped, but the fans were incensed. From then on, Doors shows were places where fans expected more than just music. Thank you, little blue men. In April '68, work began on the Doors' third album, Waiting for the Sun. It became their first and only #1 album. The single, Hello, I Love You, was also #1. Now, the Kinks claimed that the song sounded too much like their All Day and All Through the Night song. They considered suing for copyright infringement, but the Kinks let it go. Jim didn't even like the song, Ray Manzarek was given the lead vocals on the song when played live. Morrison collapsed on stage during their first European tour. Pills were the cause. Now that's Radiohead. Even I knew that. Get back with some Doors. Sorry about that. I'm not the computer savvy person I seem to be. So, Morrison collapsed on stage during their first European tour, and pills were the cause, an assortment of them that fans gave him before the show. The Jefferson Airplane was on the same bill, and somehow knew not to take pills offered by fans. Jim just gobbled them right down. The fourth album, The Soft Parade, contained the single Touch Me, which also went to number 1 on Cashbox and number 3 on Billboard in '69. It would be their third and last number 1 single. The most infamous incident that framed the Doors' controversial career was a live show in Miami, staged in an overcrowded airplane hangar where there was no air conditioning. Drunk from showing up an hour late again, Jim was in rare form. Someone poured a bottle of champagne on him. He took off his shirt. He incited the crowd. "Let's see some skin." I'm pretty sure he was talking to himself, but the audience complied. Jim's donned shirt was now a prop. He held it in front of his groin and pretended to masturbate. The audience went extra crazy nuts. Jim was accused of exposing himself on stage, even though video evidence showed that he did not. He was found guilty and sentenced to 6 months at hard labor. Pending an appeal, Jim died under mysterious circumstances before the sentence began.